Hey everybody, it's PartyElite, and it's time once again to look to the year ahead and see what we're going to have to look forward to in the world of our favorite types of games. As always, I've got 2 videos planned to collect my most anticipated games of the year, starting with this one focused primarily on strategy games in the world of RTSs, GSGs, turn-based tactics, RPGs, that sort of thing. I'll link to my other video about city building, management, and sim games in the description down below when it eventually releases, but if you've got some specific games that you're most looking forward to this year, go ahead and name them in the comments, and otherwise, remember to wishlist any games you see here today if you like the look of it. It's one of the best ways to support indie developers, particularly because of how Steam visibility works, and if you enjoy this video, consider hitting the like button too. Before we begin, I just want to mention that many of the games in this video will be published by Hooded Horse, and outside of this channel, I am affiliated with said publisher. You can learn more about this affiliation in the video linked in the description below, but it's worth noting that they have zero influence on the games I cover on the channel or what I do here in any way, shape, or form. I just like mentioning this affiliation anytime I cover their games for the sake of transparency. I'm affiliated with them because I like the games they're publishing, so it's only natural that you'd see their games in a video like this and on the channel from time to time. Now, with that out of the way, with timestamps down below, and with no more time to waste, let's begin. MENACE is set to release on the 5th of February, and I've been looking forward to this sci-fi turn-based tactical RPG for a very long time. It's from the studio that brought us Battle Brothers, so you can expect brutal combat encounters and deep, innovative mechanics on both strategic and tactical levels in a dark sci-fi setting where disparate factions are vying for control of a system and you're sent in at the head of a marine contingent to get things back in order. But things very quickly escalate. You'll improve relations with local factions and gain access to more tools of the trade. You'll barter at the black market to secure equipment, vehicles, and even squad members, and you'll recruit locals to lead said squad members alongside your initial group of hardened Marines, kitting them out and using their attributes and perks to your advantage on battlefields across multiple planets and biomes. There's a strategic layer where you upgrade your ship for off-map abilities and intermission benefits, and where you hire new or manage existing squad leaders. And then there's a tactical layer where you fight turn-based tactical battles on procedurally generated maps, taking into consideration various unit abilities, weapon proficiencies, cover, and much more in a system where each side moves one unit at a time, forcing you to stay on your toes as the removal of initiative order adds a layer of unpredictability and flexibility. From infantry to tanks to walkers, there's a huge variety of units and modular equipment on both sides of the field, and on top of all this is the operational layer that sits between strategic and tactical. When you take on a mission, you're actually going to face multiple linked battles in a procedurally generated operation to accomplish said mission. Each of these operations have different objectives, and each of the missions within each operation have different objectives, different levels of difficulty, and different rewards as well. Picking and choosing the right battles boils down to securing the right strategic advantages or cutting the enemy off from some of theirs. MENACE looks like it'll redefine aspects of the genre and bring us a challenging, intelligent, and beautiful new turn-based tactics game early on in 2026. Solasta 2 is set to release on the 12th of March, taking your RPG party to a distant continent so that you don't have to have played the first game to enjoy this one. The sequel is really upping the ante when it comes to production value, including the addition of some major voice actors and a huge visual upgrade alongside a shift to Unreal Engine 5. And beyond all this, they're also really leveling up how the game plays, with various mechanics and systems being significantly expanded upon. For example, exploration. Players are now able to explore wherever and whenever they want, treating the world map as a bit of a hex crawl rather than just a pretty backdrop as players go from point A to point B as the plot requires. This means you have to manage your movement points and fatigue not just in combat, but also as you travel from hex to hex on this global level, potentially stumbling upon various events that range from combat to random encounters, all modified by the time of day and the type of region that you're currently traversing through. This will really help bring not just the world to life, but a real tabletop feel to the game, even beyond what the first already managed to pull off. A hex crawl can be really fun if done right, and it's really cool to see the implementation here. Combat itself will be the standard turn-based tactical affair, and the plan is for the game to stick with the 2024 D&D 5th edition rule set, launching with 6 core classes: Fighter, Rogue, Cleric, Paladin, Wizard, and Sorcerer, with multi-classing available as an option right from the start, and 4 races to choose from: human, dwarf, elf, and halfling. Using this particular edition of the rule set should also introduce weapon masteries as a key consideration. This means that the choice of weapon for your combat classes will unlock additional tactical options and abilities. The first game was very loyal to its source rule set, and I'm expecting more of the same here, which should mean that Solasta 2 is yet another great CRPG for us to enjoy, with its blend of real-time exploration, hex crawls, and of course, turn-based tactical combat featuring sword and sorcery both. Mars Tactics is a turn-based tactics game set to release in May, taking us to the Red Planet as the forces of labor face off against the corporate cronies of capital, with asymmetric design at the very heart of the game and a bunch of innovative ideas as you fight on unique battlefields across Mars. Both sides have special mechanics, techs, policies, buildings, and units that set them apart and match their distinct backgrounds, and combat features an insane degree of environmental destruction paired with ballistic simulations and actions and abilities unlike anything in the genre before. Toss unprimed grenades and ammo between comrades to keep them fighting. Call in airstrikes to flatten entire buildings and either remove cover or the ground underneath your enemies, and watch as a well-placed grenade sends people scrambling or blows a hole in the ground for you to then use as a trench. Pay attention to firing angles as each bullet's trajectory is traced from the muzzle out, hitting whatever lies along its path: the target, its cover, friend, or foe. Choose the right gun for the task at hand, or use the gunsmith to make the right gun for the task at hand instead, customizing various parts of a weapon to adjust its attributes. Meanwhile, the real-time strategic map has you managing troop movements across a grid, the acquisition and application of support like artillery fire or reinforcing troops, and operational improvements through base building, recruitment, and research, with research using a special non-linear approach that requires you to first acquire equipment to reverse engineer or get help from a nation on Earth, or otherwise put some effort in before you can just randomly research a new tech out of thin air. Engage in diplomacy with the very same Earth nations as well as actors like journalists, activists, and investors to gain access to additional powers, resources, techs, weapons, soldiers, and anything else that you can't make on Mars, or choose to ignore them and potentially face their ire. Mars Tactics is full of phenomenal ideas that are completely fresh to the genre, building on strong foundations with a beautiful aesthetic, a great setting, and again, innovation at the very core. Warhammer 40k Mechanicus 2 is the sequel to one of the more innovative games in the turn-based tactics genre that you'll have heard me recommend time and time again, with this second kick at the can set to release spring of this year. You may have noticed a pattern by now. The first 3 games in this list are all described as innovative, and that's because that is something I highly prioritize when looking at these kinds of games, especially in a genre that's often so very crowded with a lot of the same stuff over and over again. So yes, this game is also innovative, much like its predecessor, and that's why I'm so excited about it. Pitting the more machine-than-man Mechanicus against the long-buried robotic Necron Empire as its denizens rise from their eons-long slumber, each faction here boasts wildly different units and mechanics, as well as heroes with unique abilities and skill trees that can turn the tide of battle, and I'm very curious to see how this game brings back and iterates upon the strategic and tactical layers of its predecessor, as well as the dungeon crawling that really set it apart, having you explore smaller maps to seek out combat, loot, and other opportunities alike, all while the looming threat of the enemy grows stronger. Territory management is a new addition here, as the narrative points towards a full-scale war for the planet that it's all set on as the game goes on. Meanwhile, unit customization and RNG-free tactical combat are making a comeback, with the latter in particular making your decision-making on the battlefield all that much more important, and this was one of my favorite things about that first game. Failure is pretty much always the result of player error, not a random dice roll. Apart from the 2 core factions, external actors will also appear as allies and foes, depending on which side you're playing as, and the parallel narratives should be an interesting journey with a veteran Warhammer author at the helm. The game was delayed out of last year to address feedback from the demo, and I'm very glad to hear that since the demo did leave a lot to be desired. So with this delay factored in, I remain super excited and cannot wait to get my hands on it later this year. Sudden Strike 5 is set to release sometime in 2026, taking us back to World War II for skirmishes against the AI, PvP multiplayer options, and a massive 25-mission campaign across Europe and North Africa featuring the Axis powers, the Soviets, and the Allies on huge maps with a sandbox-style approach allowing for a greater degree of replayability and independence. The game boasts a huge selection of unique units, including more than 190 vehicles and 110 infantry, alongside armored trains, air support, artillery, and transport vehicles with wildly different classes of units for different tasks, as you might expect. Where things get really interesting, though, is in how the game is planning on introducing a level of dynamism to the single-player campaign. First, with the environment. The FAQ suggests that you can freely destroy bridges to cut off enemy reinforcements, or use civilian boats to transport infantry over rivers, or otherwise find unique paths and approaches to outwit your enemies. Secondary objectives will unlock additional advantages like air support and supply depots, and capturing checkpoints along the edges of the map will also reduce enemy access to further reinforcements. Meanwhile, gathering prestige points gained through completing secondary objectives or securing specific points of interest on the map and resource points can be used to buy your own reinforcements, with the type of locations captured determining how reinforcements arrive, by rail or by road being the examples given by the devs so far. This seems to take a step away from the typically heavily scripted approach to single-player missions in these kinds of RTS games, and it instead puts a lot more power in the player's hands. I'm very curious to see how Sudden Strike 5 plays, and if it leans as heavily into the simulation aspects as it sounds like it'll do, I think we're in for a very, very good time here. The Last General is slated for 2026, and if you're a fan of RTS games like Warno and the Wargame series, this is definitely one to put on your radar. With battles set on massive, procedurally generated battlefields up to 400 square kilometers in size, The Last General allows you to take a high-level approach to giving strategic orders to your troops using hand-drawn battle plans that provide broad objectives for them to interpret and execute. But you can also dive in and pick out an individual unit, controlling it directly to help hit your objectives. Drive a tank, fly a jet, or be an individual infantryman as you take or defend critical objectives before zooming back out to establish new top-level orders across your forces. And of course, right down the middle is the expected approach where you're responsible for micromanaging at a squad level. Unlike Warno and all those games, there are actually base building elements here too, having you build up infrastructure, production facilities, and even defensive structures to help hold captured areas and resources. Capture urban and industrial areas to secure resources, and manufacturing capabilities to recruit new units, battling for access to electricity, parts, fuel, and ammo as you consider the value of non-military targets. Taking over or bombing critical power infrastructure, for example, can completely neuter an entire sector that your enemy was relying on to keep reinforcements flowing. The current plan is for the game to feature 12 fictional nations fighting over a fictional archipelago, and units range from tanks and IVFs and APCs to airplanes and choppers and anti-air and even supply trucks and, of course, infantry. The Last General is an extremely ambitious title where you're balancing military, production, and infrastructure layers of warfare while also worrying about things like international and local support, all in a subgenre that doesn't usually juggle all these various moving parts. I'm very excited to see it all come together. Game of Thrones War for Westeros is an RTS set to release sometime in 2026, and though the devs have gone largely quiet after the game was first revealed about half a year ago, I remain excited based on what we've seen so far. A classic RTS with extremely high production value and vibes that match the excellent Battle for Middle-earth games, an approach that I've been hoping to see brought back for many, many years now. You can expect to lead one of 4 factions at launch, including their specific hero characters, taking part in key battles in the history of the world, and engaging in all the standard aspects of the genre, from base building and economic management to unit recruitment and combat that has you commanding squads rather than individual units. You'll also, of course, be worrying about the scheming and politicking happening between would-be kings. It wouldn't be a Game of Thrones game without some of this. The world map is broken into the various provinces of Westeros, and you'll be engaged in diplomacy and deception with, as the devs put it, shifting loyalties shaping the war. What that means mechanically, we're yet to find out, but at least it implies more depth than just a bunch of battles strung together. I'll be curious to see more details about this world map layer, but either way, as you play, you'll be able to rewrite the history of the world as you lead the Lannisters, the Starks, the Targaryens, or the White Walkers, each designed with asymmetry in mind, fielding not just infantry and cavalry and siege engines, but giants and dragons and other such unique units where appropriate too. I've been waiting for a good Game of Thrones strategy game, and I'm really hoping that this is finally it. Drillkeeper, slated to release sometime in 2026, is one of the rare tower defense games in this list, as a genre where games have to really blow my mind. This one's blending in roguelike deck building elements, and the narrative has you going from planet to planet in a run to mine them out. Every planet is a procedurally generated grid-based map that can be completely dug out one tile at a time in the pursuit of gold used to activate various cards in your hand, shards used for unlocking upgrades in the meta progression layer, and more treasures including additional cards for your run, powerful geological features, and more. While you can manually mine the map out, the drill that you keep needs to be periodically operated to accomplish your actual mission. But every time you turn it on, the local wildlife comes pouring out of their holes to try and destroy it. Your deck, meanwhile, is full of cards that are meant to prevent this very thing from happening, and they can be used to place defensive towers of various types, walls and obstructions, traps of all sorts, or to activate special modifiers and abilities, so on and so forth, all with the help of the resources that you acquire through your manual digging. The other major aspect that makes Drillkeeper really stand out is its enemy steering system. The enemy seeks the most direct path to your drill, but with clever placement of structures and the tactical removal of stone and dirt walls, i.e. mining, you can change that path. Force them into a zigzag pattern as a tower fires at them from a distance, create long hallways for straight shooting crossbows to pierce through multiple of them at a time, force them onto traps, or lead them into dangerous terrain. But don't make any dead ends, because then they'll start carving their own paths. Alternate between mining until you run out of energy and drilling until you eliminate a wave, and keep going until you've completed one planet before moving on to the next and the next. Multiple biomes, multiple factions to play as that play completely differently, and a huge set of variables at both meta and run levels all make Drillkeeper one for the wish lists for sure. Neath is a very dark roguelike turn-based tactical RPG set to release in 2026, and it looks very neat. Inspired by classic dungeon crawlers, this one's got you leading a band of fragile warriors through a colossal inverted tower where the laws of reality are warped by the very gods, changing each run in fundamental ways like changing how movement or healing works, or punishing you for attacking enemies directly. Not too much is revealed about the game, but what is immensely interesting. A fluid turn-based system means the turn order is always shifting, where enemies telegraph their moves, freezing your fighters in fear when targeted, asking you to cleverly counter them to free up your allies. I'm really curious to see the extents of not just this concept, but also the idea of controlling your enemies entirely. The trailer shows it in action, and I'm immediately curious. Then, as you're dungeon crawling, you'll of course come across a variety of events with various risks and rewards to poke and prod at, egging you on to push your luck for greater reward. Runs will involve growing your party and unlocking new abilities or securing unique synergies, but again, the changing, warping reality means that nothing works exactly the same way twice, adding that many more permutations into the mix. I'm really excited for Neath, even though we don't know all that much. Lovecraftian horror, gorgeous pixel art graphics, and mind-bending timey-wimey stuff with turn-based tactics all sounds, yet again, extremely innovative and awesome. Minos is another very intriguing roguelike tower defense game set to release sometime in 2026 that has you playing as the famous Minotaur of Crete and Daedalus, and tasks you with defending the Minotaur from adventurers seeking to kill him. It's not often that I get into a tower defense game, you've heard me say this time and time again if you follow the channel, but this one really stands out from the crowd in some very intriguing ways. The point that you have to defend here is the Minotaur, meaning that it's a living, breathing thing that can be moved around on the map, and the enemies that you have to defeat all originate from the same location and head towards the Minotaur using the path of least resistance. This path of least resistance is up to you to design, by which I mean you need to turn it into the path of maximum resistance as you seek to kill the adventurers before they get to the Minotaur. You'll place a variety of unique traps down in specific trap slots and modify the very walls of the maze to create paths that trigger these traps. Some require adventurers to step on them, some lure them off their path into a dead end to kill them, some shoot at them from down a hall, and some only operate on specific members of an adventuring party. Completing a level opens up branching paths of further levels for you to defend, each rewarding you with different meta progression resources that you can then use to seek out upgrades and additional types of traps, challenging you with different map sizes, modifiers, and numbers of hunting parties, including the constituents of said hunting parties. Do they fight in melee? Do they fight from range? Is it a famous character from Greek myth? I'm really curious to see how the challenge escalates and what crazy trap combos and chain reactions you can build, as that seems to be a big part of the game here. It all sounds very compelling, and I can't wait to check it out. Fogpiercer is a roguelike deck builder set to release sometime in 2026, taking you to the apocalypse and tasking you with driving a train through a perilous, bandit-infested fog. This is one of the most high-octane turn-based games I've ever seen, as it relies heavily on not just synergies, but chain reactions, collateral damage, and using yourself as a weapon when the opportunity arises, rewarding daring choices at every junction. As you go from region to region, each with its own biome and mechanics and special rewards, you'll travel across the typical branching paths to go from battle to acquire resources, or to seek out stops where you can get repairs or buy and upgrade your carriages. The carriages and the locomotive and the driver of choice all determine what cards go in your deck, with upgrades to each unlocking more options. A hacker carriage might give you the ability to use decoys or take control of enemy vehicles. An artillery carriage will have its unique firing pattern, different from a minigun carriage, and while a minigun can cause a lot of damage or sabotage a hit target to take damage every time it moves, artillery will force people off their path, potentially into your tracks and under your wheels, or into each other. Shields, cranes, passengers, and more, each representing unique tactical options, are all powerful tools to use as enemies of various kinds telegraph their attacks, giving you the opportunity to dodge them or, more entertainingly, pit them against each other. Destroy a lead vehicle to have it crash into the ones behind it, weaken an enemy that's about to get hit by another enemy that you're about to put in its path, push a vehicle into the path of an oncoming pillar or other environmental danger, or into another enemy who gets nudged into another, until one falls off a cliff or bounces off one of your shielded cars to eke damage. The action is insane, it's absolutely intense, the combinations are super satisfying, and the game is definitely one to keep an eye on. Pathbreakers Roaming Blades is slated to release sometime in 2026, and is a very exciting turn-based tactical RPG in the vein of Battle Brothers, where you lead your band of mercenaries in a procedurally generated world filled with monsters and bandits and settlements full of quest givers and trade opportunities and a huge variety of equipment to loot, buy, and sell as you go adventuring. But of course, the game differentiates itself in many major ways to stand out. For one, the game leans heavily into high fantasy. Magic is prevalent, bringing all kinds of beautiful spells to the battlefield, and the game visually also has more of this high fantasy feel to it, and some settlements you come upon actually aren't even human. Otherwise, the game also has overarching plots and story-related quests determined by your chosen origin, and there's a class-based approach to leveling up, featuring 8 classes that further subdivide into 2 each, with a few different ways to advance and unlock powerful abilities. Quests have branching paths as well, and varied outcomes. Enemies have access to their own classes beyond the 8, and from time to time, you'll find yourself participating in a dungeon crawl with its own set of unique mechanics that'll involve resource management as you stumble upon unique opportunities and risks alike. Even on the surface, you'll keep an eye on rations, wages, and long-term health and well-being as your warriors take on injuries and traumas and new traits over the course of a long campaign, especially as they engage in the game's tough tactical battles where you have to take into consideration weapon reach, flanks, the impact of time of day, and just a multitude of attributes per unit and per weapon. Be a band of merchants, warriors, or explorers as you accomplish quests and gain renown and build a reputation. This kind of sandbox, blended with actual challenging strategic and tactical decision-making, makes it an extremely exciting prospect in my eyes. Fragile Existence is a very exciting sci-fi RTS, slated for release sometime this year, and I've been looking forward to it for years. A great dev diary at the end of last year brought some great news with it about what the dev's been cooking up and why he needs just a bit more time, so I highly recommend you check that out too. the game has a very compelling premise. You're leading the last of humanity across star systems in a flotilla that represents the entire species' last hope of survival. An existential alien threat is hunting you down, and it's never too far behind your arrival at a new system. Rush to colonize and extract resources from the various planets within the system to get what you can before moving on to the next, and the next, and the next. Occasionally getting into skirmishes against all manner of enemy, fighting in the vast void of space, the perilous orbit around planets, or on their surfaces, using dropships to transport troops up and down as needed. And what's more, the resources that you need to complete your objectives or build more units are all physicalized too, meaning you'll need to keep an eye on your supply chain and ensure not to stretch it too thin, a concept that's frequently overlooked by games about war. I'm very excited for this one, as it's not only trying something quite unique in the space, but it's coming with a scenario editor that'll allow players to build their own planets, systems, and even storylines with a visual scenario editor directly in-game, which means potentially endless replayability. Espiocracy is slated for 2026, and if you follow the channel, you'll have heard me talk about it before. With a start date set in the Cold War, this grand strategy game will have you playing not as a country, but as an intelligence agency, completely changing what it means to paint the map. While you will engage in things like war and diplomacy and research, as with many other games in the genre, here you'll spend more of your time working from the shadows to influence not just your own nation and its people, but also those of foreign nations in order to accomplish your objectives. Everything from nuclear brinkmanship to terrorism to coups are all on the table as you acquire influential actors around the world, worry about their personal biases as you assign them tasks, and watch as they form cliques and subgroups that sometimes will work in your favor, and sometimes you might need to concern yourself with. Political parties, guerrilla forces, and trade unions all need to be influenced and directed in the right way depending on what you're trying to accomplish, and if not them, then perhaps you'll use pop culture and propaganda to make your plans come to light instead. Pick from agencies all around the world in a time period when the world is being divided into 3 major blocks and as decolonization takes root. There's a lot I could go over, spread out across 60 dev diaries, but I'll save it for my deep dive video on the game that's taken forever for me to put together just because of how dense the game actually is. I'm a huge fan of the subject matter, the era, and the genre, so it's only natural that I'm constantly chomping at the bit to talk about Espiocracy. If you're looking for a game that lets you rewrite history from the shadows, keep an eye on this one. Gilded Destiny is another grand strategy game slated for release later this year, taking you to the Industrial Revolution and asking you to pick a nation from around the world to lead through tumultuous times. The game has a lot of overlap with Victoria, for sure, but it also does some very core things in its own unique way that make a huge difference in how the game will play compared to any other GSG I've seen. The game is largely centered around economic forces, and you'll spend a lot of your time managing the needs and wants of your people, with differences for every strata of society and production chain. You'll build out your own industries, seek trade with other nations, or go to war in pursuit of them, all the while managing the cultural, religious, and political aspects of your nation too, and of course, pushing ever forward in the race for technology and expansion. One of the biggest differentiators, though, is how you interact with geography. In Gilded Destiny, the world is subdivided at its smallest into tiny little hexes as space for your cities to expand into, as specific points where resources and buildings might be located, and even as tactical considerations. When your armies march, they go from hex to hex, not from province to province or region to region. So, for example, crossing difficult terrain means needing to actually navigate it. Seek out mountain passes, for example, or prepare to defend them as critical choke points, or use well-placed train stations that can speed your troops along from one end of a continent to another, but also potentially be vulnerable to enemy incursions. Keep an eye out for rivers and lakes and mesas and all kinds of geographical features that typically don't matter at a GSG level, but here with Gilded Destiny can fundamentally change your tactical approach to any given situation. The same goes for resource gathering buildings, city expansion, practically everything else, adding a whole new dimension to the gameplay. Gilded Destiny has some really special ideas when it comes to the genre, and I can't wait to dive deeper into this one. Heroes of Might and Magic Olden Era is the next game in the classic strategy series, looking to release sometime in 2026, and staying true to the heights of the franchise, at least in my humble opinion. Heroes 3, while introducing actually good innovations to switch things up a little and introduce additional decision making, like when to use the slowly acquired focus resource to unleash powerful abilities in battle. Raise the dead, teleport your allies, heal the hurt, or just fling magic across the battlefield. Combat is massively varied and truly awesome regardless of who you play as or your preferred playstyle. Turn-based empire building, turn-based hex-based combat, and all the other fixings of a hero's game are on full display, with 6 wildly asymmetrical factions having a huge number of faction leaders that influence optimal choices across the board, from what units to recruit into their armies to what resources or battlefield tactics to prioritize. An intricate leveling up mechanic for units, easy to learn but hard to master combat systems, and the joy of exploring procedurally generated maps all come together nicely here, with a narrative single-player campaign that has branching paths and multiple multiplayer modes ranging from the classics to new innovations, and of course, a map editor so you can make your own worlds. I could go on and on about this game, but instead I'll suggest you go play the demo for a very good taste of a lot of what it has to offer, or think back on your time playing Heroes of Might and Magic 3, casting epic spells, leading fantastical creatures, and rushing to explore a map filled with countless points of interest, neutral armies to contend with, and piles of resources that could get you the upper hand against your enemies. A good new Heroes of Might and Magic game is extremely hard to come by and even harder to make, but these devs are doing an excellent job. Falling Frontier is currently aiming for a 2026 release date after a couple of delays, and this space sci-fi RTS continues to be one of my absolute most anticipated games ever since I first came across it. I can confirm that development has been making great progress in huge leaps and bounds, and a massive post at the end of last year puts a lot of it on display, but there's still lots coming to this absolute beast of a game. With its hard sci-fi focus, narrative approach, and cinematic quality, the dev is up to something truly unique. Physicalized resources ask you to truly think about how you expand across space and guard your supply chains. Ships of different classes operate in fundamentally different ways, but allow you to customize them to a great degree to build missile boats, electronic warfare specialists, scouts, and much more besides, editing internal modules as well as hardpoints and crew that bring their expertise to bear. Logistics plays a major role as you transport munitions, fuel, and food alongside your warships to keep them fighting fit, with planet-side and orbital construction necessary for the acquisition or production of these resources that are essential to your war machine. Even recon is an involved affair as you consider radar shadows, signal size, noise, LiDAR, and much more as means of detection and cover, with the environment, thin as it might be in space, playing a major role. It's an ambitious project and a space game like no other. You can expect to see more about it on the channel later this year, and I can definitely recommend keeping an eye on it. Dawn of War 4 passes the torch of this classic RTS series over to the developers King Art, the geniuses behind Iron Harvest, which is another excellent classic RTS made in the vein of Company of Heroes and some aspects of Dawn of War 1 and 2. So, it's safe to say that I'm beyond excited for this one, listed simply as coming soon, though the trailer does promise a 2026 release. 70 campaign missions, that's 70 campaign missions, are spread across 4 wildly different factions at launch, including my favorite Necrons, as well as Space Marines, Orcs, and the Adeptus Mechanicus. And this means plenty of playtime in a rich, narrative single-player mode before you flip to battles against the AI, or multiplayer in 1v1, 2v2, and 3v3 formats. I might do a deep dive on all the things that have been revealed so far separately, so let me know if you're interested in that and I'll make a video about it. I cannot wait to play it on the channel, especially as it promises to bring back some classic gameplay elements of base building and unit recruitment, alongside the beautiful sync-kill system that always made combat in Dawn of War feel visceral and personal, and they're no small feat to make, with unique animations pitting units against each other in countless potential combinations. The game looks absolutely gorgeous, the battles look massive with huge unit counts thanks to the squad-based approach, and the whole thing is just absolutely dripping with personality. I cannot wait. The Expanse Osiris Reborn is a bit of an outlier in this list perhaps, but I'm a sucker for the Expanse and it's an RPG, so here it is. It's just listed as coming soon for now, so I'll keep this short and leave a deep dive for later. One of my favorite things about the Expanse has always been how good of a hard sci-fi series it is. That is to say, it pays extra attention to the science part of science fiction, trying to stay as grounded as possible, while obviously taking some liberties so that the plot can advance, and for budget in the case of the TV series. So when I found out that Owlcat had advisors, including former astronauts, weighing in to help design and understand aspects of the game, I knew it was in excellent hands. But enough about my love for the IP, let's actually talk about the game. In the Expanse Osiris Reborn, you play as a mercenary that happens to be at the wrong place at the wrong time, with class-free character customization allowing you to hail from either Earth, Mars, or the Belt as you get dragged into a system-wide conspiracy. Your crew are highly trained specialists, and you have to deal with relationships, political pressures, and fragile alliances, and the claim, like with any good RPG, is that every decision leaves its mark. Build bonds with your companions, engage in intense third-person cover-based gunplay, often in 0G, working with companions that are fighting with you, similar to Mass Effect's order-based system, or sometimes your companions will be providing support remotely. Meanwhile, you'll visit famous locations in the story, and you'll freely explore the solar system. The game looks absolutely beautiful, it's checking all of my boxes, and as far as I'm concerned, Owlcat tends not to miss, so this is super exciting. Warhammer 40k Dark Heresy is the next CRPG from Owlcat, built off the tabletop RPG system of the same name. You play as an acolyte of the Inquisition in the world of Warhammer 40k, meaning you and your party will go around investigating heresies and dealing justice in the name of the God Emperor in the grim, dark future. Even if you don't care much for the IP, I can highly recommend anything Owlcat makes, and if you enjoyed Rogue Trader from a couple years ago, this is the natural successor to that, and I expect similarly engaging turn-based tactical combat, equally long and intertwined narrative threads that are actually worth pursuing, and just as colorful a band of party members to recruit, ranging from the most pious and loyal to the more questionable alliances. Not all members of the Inquisition adhere to the rules, as is their right, and sometimes the ends justify the means, which is a concept I'm very much looking forward to exploring in the world of Dark Heresy. I cannot wait for this game to come out, and I've been hoping for it ever since Rogue Trader was first announced, actually. It looks phenomenal, and Rogue Trader made it clear that Owlcat knows how to make a solid sci-fi CRPG at this grand scale. Star Wars Zero Company is a game that we don't know too much about just quite yet, but it's a turn-based tactics game set in my favorite universe during a very critical time period, the final stages of the Clone Wars. It's a game I've been hoping for almost 20 years now, so yes, it's safe to say that even though we don't know too much about it just yet, I am extremely excited for it, and I really hope that it releases this year. Even if you're not a big Star Wars fan, it does sound like the developers aren't letting the IP do the heavy lifting, and instead are just making a very good turn-based tactics game in the world of Star Wars. You play as a former Republic officer in charge of Zero Company, an unlikely band of professionals hired to take on an emerging threat to the galaxy. It sounds like the game's going for a more gritty approach to the IP, which is fantastic, and what little has been discussed so far highlights cool synergies between the various classes of companions, from clone troopers providing covering fire to astromechs tossing healing Bacta stims, all while managing terrain-related factors across a wide range of locations and mission types. Infiltrate a separatist base, raid a pirate outpost, and otherwise operate from the shadows, returning to your HQ from time to time to recruit new operatives or unlock new skills and abilities for the company. Bonds between operatives, decisions that matter, and a whole galaxy to interact with. What's not to love? Alright, now it's time for some rapid-fire bonus picks that only say to be announced on their store pages, but might come this year and are absolutely on my radar. Total War Warhammer 40k brings Total War, as predicted, to the sci-fi side of the Warhammer coin, introducing a ton of innovations to the series to match the wildly different setting. I'll do a deep dive in a separate video about all that we know so far, but turn-based empire building at a galactic level and massive real-time battles featuring some of the most iconic factions in the genre makes this an easy recommendation as one to put on your radar too. Sanctuary Shattered Sun is a sci-fi classic RTS with some really epic ideas as you engage in combat across the surface of a Dyson sphere in single and multiplayer. The game is focused on strategic thinking over actions per minute, as absolutely massive armies engage across huge battlefields with base building and terrain-changing mega weapons and weather-altering tech that can open up new approaches for the clever tactician. Everything I see here is right up my alley. Anvil Empires is the successor to Foxhole, bringing a medieval MMO that will allow thousands of players to face off in a persistent open world where you'll be able to build up settlements from little hamlets to fortresses using a modular building system while working together with other members of your kingdom to wage war against other kingdoms, either as a fighter, providing logistical support and supplies, or producing siege equipment for use in assaults, and more. This is the same mind-blowing concept behind Foxhole, just in a wildly different era, and the demo and playtests last year were all very promising. Front RTS looks like a potentially phenomenal RTS, blending in grand strategy with a non-linear campaign and procedural worlds while featuring a turn-based global map to go with the real-time battling that happens within each region of said map, featuring huge unit counts, destructible environments, and countless little details, and looking absolutely gorgeous while doing so. I haven't even touched on Divinity, the next CRPG from Larian, or Total War Medieval 3, the series' return to the historical space after a very long time. Neither even have Steam pages yet, and I'm already well over my 20 game target for this video, so I'll just mention those two in passing to get them on your radar like they are on mine, and bring today's video to an end, finally. See anything you like? Make sure you go and wishlist it on Steam, and don't hesitate to leave a like on this video to help spread the word on these games too. Keep your eyes peeled for my city building and management focused video coming in a few weeks, and until then, as always, a massive thanks goes out to all of the channel members and patrons who've been supporting the channel on a monthly basis. Y'all keep us alive and running smoothly, and of course a big old thanks goes out to each and every one of you for watching. Until next time, cheers.